Well, it's time to get back to work. It's been a few weeks and I haven't been working a lot on the Thorn. When I was in Tobago recently, one of the models I have over there, the Emma Berry, the case had cracked, and it was one of the early cases I had built, and the whole thing is one solid piece. So I was very concerned I wouldn't be able to take the broken glass out and replace it. By some miracle I did, and she's back up, and I have her temporarily stored here, but she'll be back to Tobago. As a final piece, I had never done a base, a permanent base for the case of the Emma Berry. So I've made up this mahogany base, and again, one of the issues we all have, as we know, when we find models and we don't know who's made it, when, why. So again, I have this little habit where I put on a base, just a little bit about it. It's Emma Berry, the year it was built, who built it, where it was, and minimum of particulars. And so I thought I would use this as one of the learning tools to help me with my carving, which I have been started to attack. I did this by going on the printer and printing out the size and the font that I wanted, and then using all of the chisels that I had, as well as the power tools, both the turbo carver and the forearm, to try and cut it out in some reasonable manner. And in the end, it didn't come out too bad. I did then put some pencil on it and then covered it over with epoxy, which I later sanded. Lesson learned, the board wasn't that flat at this place, so I actually sanded some of the letters off. So I think before you do an exercise like this, make sure you're starting with a flat surface. But I was pleased, as I say, it's just for long-term information. As you have seen in previous videos, I love wipe-on poly. It's just so easy to put on, build up the pieces, and then easy to service later on if I want to touch it up. So here she is, all completed now, with a new base on it. This was some mahogany that I got from a friend, and she never had a base, so it's nice to finally put this. And we'll just send this back to Tobago, and opens up another slot for another model like the Thorn, which perhaps it's best I get back to finishing the Thorn. And so what I've been doing is really want to verify that all the levels that I established when I was building the boat are correct. So to do that, I've drawn a series of lines in the front of each of the gun ports going right through. Done it on both sides, and then also in the areas right at the end here where there's not a gun port. So I'd have a mark here, same thing here. And then back to the plan to compare to see how well I've done. Because again, you know, I'm obsessed with cumulative errors, and really it's been a long time since I did this work. This is a print of the ship, and what I've done is I have the actual measurements written at the bottom. These are measurements that I would have taken straight off the plan, and these are the actual measurements of the boat. And I'm pleasantly surprised that I'm actually spot on. So Greg Herbert, finally, I've actually achieved success of no cumulative errors over quite a long period of time, and that's a first on this build. In cleaning up the tops of the model, Greg reminds us to make sure that we get the angle correct and that you use a flat sanding board that gets the level both here and on the other side exactly the same. So before you get to the final height that you want to go to, just make sure it's done with a flat board like this. Now it's time to drill 1,000 holes. So we take out the fordham, and we're using a .025 drill bit. So off we went. This is the second really heavy work with the fordham. And one of the things I noticed is I found it actually got hot. I would say after 2 minutes, 3 minutes of working with it, the handpiece, which is number 30, got quite hot. So I'm going to write them about that because I don't think that's supposed to happen. Now I've put these 3 nails twice through the Jim Barnes draw plate, and you should see they would fit very nicely in. It's no issue really. So off we went, taking my time. I did this in batches. It took 8 sessions. Your hand would get a little bit cramped and I get tired and perhaps even a little bored. But it did all get done, and I was pleasantly surprised at the end of the day. This is what it looked like. And after I had sanded it, I only had 3 or 4 pieces that came out that I had to reapply. So then I got the sanding blocks out, and that's the same sanding block that I bought from Amazon, which uses Velcro pads. And really, that's my great find in the last few months in terms of really convenient tools. Of course, I'm pushing hard against this, and I didn't realize I actually put pressure and the front support broke. So I had to get a little epoxy and put it back in and stick it. I had asked Greg quite a while back what he thought the thickness of the frames were at the top, and never really got a definitive answer, so I've emailed him off. But you'll see, obviously, as we thin this, we're more interested in the line than the exact thickness at any point in time. So you'll see some thinning, as in this case here, will be below the 3 inches, whereas here it's probably just at the 3 inches. So what I did is I took a line and used the thinnest part, and then just drew a line to give me a feel, because clearly I'm going to have to clean up the inside all along so I get a consistent thickness. When I look at the plan, which you'll see up in the left-hand corner, it looks somewhere that the thickness of the frame at this point here is between 5 and 6 inches. Because remember, I'll have a 3-inch plank on the inside, and then I have a 3-inch overlap for the plank shear, which again, my estimate is that's around 15 inches. Greg has confirmed that the thickness of the frame is roughly 6 inches, even though the book probably shows it at 5.5, and this is it on scale. So it's really right on that line. For those of you who will think this a bit boring, you can skip ahead, but for the sake of completeness, I'm going through the entire top part of the frame, measuring the line to make sure it's correct. And you'll notice as we go along some blue tape, and that's there to protect the deck, to make sure that when I start sanding, because I'm going to use a power tool, that there's no chance of me affecting the work I've already done. The line is slightly oversized, and I plan to sand to the outside edge of the line, and the last bit of the sanding will be done by hand. This brings me back to one of the challenges I had very early on when I was trying to figure out how to taper the top of these. And again, should I plank the inside of the frames first or the outside? I chose to do the outside simply because I had more control and I would get a better quality finish. And of course, that's what would be most obvious for you to see. That's going to give me a little challenge of how I am going to establish the thickness from the bow all the way to the stern. So I have a few things thinking in my brain how I might achieve that. But just to clarify so you understand, the top of the plank shear is 15 inches. The overlap is 3 inches, the thickness at the top is 6 inches, and the line that I'm drawing, which relates to the outside plank plus the thickness of the frame, that's 9 inches. So that's the decisions that I've made based on the advice I have. Those who don't believe in power tools would be aghast to see me here with the Micromot right angle sander. This is really taking down the bulk. I'm not going right to the line. And you'll also know that I have painted, I've put some masking tape inside. And the area where I was nervous, I actually even put a piece of wood just in case it went through the masking tape. I've left the equivalent of 3 inches, which I'll take down by hand, a hand sander. I did try to do this with a plane. I did try to do it with an extremely sharp chisel. It just was going to cause more problems. I had less control. So the sander was perfect. The termite fluid gives off such an awful smell when I bring it on the inside, so I'm just going to quickly dry it off and put the rub-on poly on it, ready to seal it in place. There's a lot of debate about whether you can see the tree nails because they're so small, but quite clearly if you look at this, the tree nails are very visible. They are to scale, so again, it's really worth doing that exercise. I got this measuring gauge on Lee Valley, and this is a perfect time to use it. Again, setting up 6 inches plus the 3 inches, which is 9 inches, and just use it and go around the model. Now it's time to install the scupper drains, and I've had quite a bit of discussion with Greg. The drains were 4-inch. It doesn't say whether it's internal diameter or external diameter. So I got some tubing that is actually 4 inches. The internal diameter is 4 inches. And then I found another piece of tubing that fits tightly over it. And my plan is to cut these off on my chop saw, solder them, and then fit them. The discussion with Greg is how flush should they be mounted. Some of the boats on the Nautical Research Guild show the pipe coming out quite a bit. And it looks odd, although it does look to scale, whereas mine looks fantastic, but looks a little large to scale. Having said that, if you look at the diagram, that outside diameter of the lip of the scupper is actually 7 inches, and I am just short of 4.5 inches. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to drill a hole that's the exact diameter of the 4-inch pipe, and then put a slight recess that allows me to push the whole piece in, and it'll look as though it was a plate, a thin plate, and you won't see the thickness of the piece that I cut on the chop saw. So here's my example. I've drilled the hole. I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is the part I've made up, and you can see the flashing on the end is quite wide, but in this example that I've made up, I've drilled 2 holes, and so I can push it in and get it to whatever I want, and that looks really quite nice. And of course, before we do anything, you need to clean it up. It's going to be difficult to sand afterwards. So we'll now just cut 14 of these out, and using the chop saw with a cut wheel. And I put this because it goes flying, and I want to make sure if it's going to fly forward. So let's go. So there's one. You've got lots extras, so the first thing we do is clean up the pipe that's to be soldered. And we'll do 2 on each pipe on both ends. And doing it this way, we can grind down the end as we see fit. So we've sanded it off. Now we're going to put a little bit of flux on the piece, and I'm going to pull the piece up. We're going to solder so it gets some flux on the inside. Remember, solder flows to the heat, so we heat the piece up. You really don't need a lot of solder. That's it. I found it's actually easier to use a cut-off wheel to cut the pieces. And we'll epoxy these in. But now that they're blackened, they've really disappeared very nicely. I'm pretty happy with how that's come out. I think it looks very realistic. And yeah, I don't think there's any really golden rule. So I think we'll bring this to an end and do the other side. And then we'll start on the outside moldings in the next video. However, I'm going to be in New York for the next month, so not very much is going to get done here. But I'm going to be shopping for nice new tools, so we'll see you when we come back. And remember, keep modeling.